A long time ago, on the edge of an old forest, there lived a woodcutter with his wife and a little daughter. In the forest, it was very cold. So the little girl's mother stitched her a pretty Red Riding Hood. The little girl loved the riding hood so much that she wore it wherever she went. Soon, everyone began calling her Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood's mother and father let her play in the forest, but her mother often said to her, "Don't go too deep in the forest, my child, for there are many dangerous animals just waiting to eat you up." Little Red Riding Hood had a grandmother who lived on the other side of the forest. Little Red Riding Hood would eagerly wait for a weekly visit to her grandmother's house. Little Red Riding Hood would ask her father to take her through the forest on his horse. One day, while Little Red Riding Hood was playing in the forest, an old woodcutter came running to see her. He was her father's friend. The old woodcutter came up to her and said, "Hurry, little one, go and tell your father and mother that your grandmother is very ill." She ran in to tell her mother the sad news. Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "We have to send these medicines to your grandmother at once, but your father is away cutting woods. What shall we do?" Little Red Riding Hood said, "Mother, I'll go to Grandma's house. She will be glad to see me." So Little Red Riding Hood's mother put the medicines in a basket. Little Red Riding Hood ran out of her cottage and headed for her grandmother's cottage. On the way, Little Red Riding Hood stopped and said to herself, "If I go around the forest, it will take a long time to reach Grandma's house. If I go through the forest, I'll get faster and I'll be able to give Grandma her medicine." Her heart beat fast as she ran through the tall, dark trees and stones in the forest. A wicked old wolf spotted her. He said to himself, "Ah, today is my lucky day. That little girl is all alone in the forest. She would make a tasty meal." The wicked old wolf took another path and ran ahead of Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood had never seen the wolf before. So, although she was afraid, she stopped and said, "Good day, sir." The wolf was surprised. He said, "Ah, hello, little girl. Where are you going?" "I'm going to my grandmother's cottage. She's ill and needs some medicine." The wicked wolf thought to himself, "Ah, it's truly a lucky day for me. I'll eat up the grandmother and then I'll eat this tasty little girl. Go, go, you must hurry and get the medicines to her." She ran away towards her grandma's cottage. The wicked wolf ran through a shortcut in the forest and reached grandma's cottage. Quietly, he opened the door and entered the cottage. The wolf found Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother sleeping in her bed. He was so hungry that he pounced on her and swallowed her in one gulp. The cunning wolf knew that if he pounced on Little Red Riding Hood, she would scream and alert the woodcutters nearby. So he decided to trick Little Red Riding Hood. He dressed up in a grandma's clothes and put on Granny's cap and lay down in her bed. Little Red Riding Hood finally reached Grandma's cottage. There was only a little candle in the bedroom, so Little Red Riding Hood found it difficult to see. She ran inside and shouted, "Grandma, Grandma, how are you? I brought your medicines, don't worry." She thought that the wolf was a grandmother. The wolf tried to make it sound like an old lady as he said, "Thank you for coming, my child. Put down your basket and come sit by my side." "Oh, Grandma, your voice sounds so different. You must be so ill. Why don't you take the medicines that Mother has sent for you?" The wolf replied, "Oh, don't worry, my child. I'll get better if you just hold my hand." Little Red Riding Hood smiled and looked closely into her grandmother's face. "Grandma, Grandma, what big eyes you have." The wolf quickly replied, "Better to see you, my dear." Little Red Riding Hood looked closer and said, "Grandma, what big ears you have." The wolf replied, "The better to hear you, my dear." The Little Red Riding Hood said, "My goodness, Grandma, what big teeth you have. The better to eat you, my dear." Little Red Riding Hood ran out of the cottage screaming, "Help me, help me." Just then, Little Red Riding Hood's father came riding on his horse. Little Red Riding Hood's father killed the wicked wolf with one sweep of his axe. Just then, they heard a muffled sound coming from the wicked wolf's belly. They cut open the wolf's belly and found that Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother was still alive. Now, I hope you realize what happens when you talk to strangers, my child. Little Red Riding Hood promised not to talk to strangers or walk alone in the forest again, and they all lived happily ever after.
The Wolf and the 7 Little Goats. Once upon a time, a goat who had 7 young children had to go into a forest to fetch some food. So she called the little goats and said, "Dear children, I am going to the forest. Beware of the wolf. If it comes here, it will eat you. It may try to cheat you, but you will recognize it by its terrible voice and black paws." The little goats replied, "Don't worry, Mother. We will take care." After their mother left, there was a knock at the door. And somebody said, "Open the door, children. Your mother is here." Hearing the wolf's voice, the little goats replied, "You are not our mother, as our mother has a soft voice, and you have a terrible voice. You are the wolf." The wolf went away. And after some time came back again. It had eaten a piece of chalk to make its voice soft. Again, it knocked at the door and repeated the same words. The goats saw the paws of the wolf from the window and said, "No, you are not our mother. Our mother has white paws, but your paws are black. You are the wolf." Hearing this, the wolf went to a baker and, pretending to be injured, asked him to put some kneaded flour on its paws. Then it went to the miller and asked him to put some dry flour on its paws. Now its paws looked white. Again the wolf knocked at the same door and called out, "Children, your mother has got something nice for you." The wolf put its white paws on the windowsill. The little goats thought it to be the paws of their mother and opened the door. Immediately, the wolf entered the house. The goats were afraid and rushed in all directions to hide themselves. But the wolf found them and ate them up one by one. However, the wolf forgot to look for the youngest little goat that had hidden safely. After eating them, the wolf went back to the forest to sleep. When the mother goat came back, she was shocked at what she saw. Everything was scattered in the room, and there were no little goats. She called out to them one by one, and at last she called the youngest one. The youngest goat said, "I am here, mother, hidden in the clock." Then it came out from the clock and told its mother all about what had happened. Both of them cried over the death of the other little goats. Then they went to the forest and found the sleeping wolf. The mother goat noticed something moving inside the wolf's stomach. She exclaimed with surprise, "Oh my goodness! I think my children are still alive in the wolf's stomach." Immediately, the mother goat cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf with a sharp knife. Six of her children jumped out from the wolf's stomach one by one. Everyone was safe as the wolf had not chewed them. It had just swallowed them. They were very happy. Then the mother said, "Go and fetch stones to fill up the wolf's stomach before it wakes." The children obeyed their mother, and the mother goat quickly sewed up the wolf's stomach. The wolf was so deep in slumber that it did not move. When the wolf woke up, it felt thirsty. And it went to a nearby stream to quench its thirst. As it walked, the heavy stones made it feel uncomfortable as they were rolling inside its body. It started crying bitterly in pain. When the wolf reached the edge of the stream to drink water, because of the heavy stones, it found itself unable to balance. It fell into the stream and died. The mother goat and her 7 children were watching all this from their hiding place. As soon as they heard the cries of the drowning wolf, they yelled out with joy, "The wolf is dead! The wolf is dead!" After that, Mother Goat and the 7 little goats lived happily ever after. Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago, there lived a king and a queen. They were very sad as they had no children of their own. One day, the queen was sitting near a pond in the castle garden. Suddenly, a frog hopped onto a lily flower in front of her and said, "Your wish will be granted. Before a year has passed, a daughter will be born to you. Croak, croak." Her wish was granted, just like the frog said. A little girl was born to the king and queen. They were so happy that they ordered a grand feast to be held to celebrate the event. All their friends, relatives and the 12 fairies of the kingdom were invited. But there were in all 13 fairies in the kingdom. One fairy was not invited. Why? Because the king and queen considered number 13 to be an unlucky number. So the 13th fairy was not at all happy. She was very angry indeed. On the day of the celebration, all the guests had gathered in the king's palace with their gifts. The 12 fairies came with their special gifts for the baby girl. One fairy said, "I grant her good qualities." Another said, "I give her beauty." Another fairy gave her riches, another health, and so on. Now the little princess had all the gifts that every parent desires for his beloved child. Soon 11 fairies had given their gifts. As soon as the 12th fairy was going to give her gift, the hall door flew open, and the 13th fairy came in. She was angry at not being invited to the feast. She wanted to take her revenge. She said, "On her 15th birthday, the princess will prick her finger on a needle and die." Then, in a huff, she left the palace, leaving all present stunned. There was silence all around. Then the 12th fairy, who had not yet given her gift, said, "I cannot undo the 13th fairy's curse, but I can reduce it a little. The princess will not die, but sleep for 100 years." The king and queen ordered for the destruction of all the needles in the kingdom. As time went by, the princess grew to be a beautiful, wise, and friendly young lady. Everyone loved her. On the morning of her 15th birthday, the princess was alone in the castle. She wandered through the unending passages and rooms of the castle. She went upstairs and downstairs. At last, she came to an old tower. After climbing the narrow flight of stairs to reach it, she found its door locked by a rusty key. Turning the key, the princess opened the door. There, she saw an old woman with a spinning wheel. The princess wished her good morning and asked, "What are you doing?" The old woman replied, "I am spinning. Would you like to give it a try? As soon as the princess took hold of the spindle, the needle pricked her finger, and she fell into a deep sleep. Almost immediately, everyone in the castle fell asleep, including the king and the queen. Even the courtiers, animals, and birds fell asleep. thick hedge grew around the castle, and soon not even the flag on the highest tower could be seen. Throughout the land, the story soon spread of a beautiful princess who was asleep in a lost castle, where every living creature lay motionless in deep sleep. Many brave princes came and tried to break the spell, but could not succeed. A 100 years passed, and one day a young prince came to know about the story of the sleeping princess. He was very brave. When this young prince came near the hedge turned into fine flowers and made way for him to pass through. In the courtyard, he found horses and dogs lying fast asleep. He saw the king and queen asleep on their thrones. The prince searched the castle and at last he reached the old tower and opened the door of the little chamber. Where the princess was sleeping. She looked so beautiful that the prince could not stop himself. He kissed her. Lo and behold, as soon as he did so, the princess opened her eyes. At the same time, the king and the queen woke up. Soon all the living creatures in the castle woke up. There were sounds of happy voices all around. It was as if all was well the way it was 100 years ago. The prince and the princess fell in love and soon got married. They lived happily ever after. Jack and the Beanstalk. There once lived a woman with her son Jack. They had a cow called Milky White. They lived on the milk the cow gave every morning, which they sold in the market. One morning, Milky White gave no milk. "What shall we do now, Mother?" asked Jack. "Oh yes, oh dear, what shall we do? What shall we do?" cried his mother. "Mother, Maybe I'll get work somewhere, said Jack. Oh, you tried working before, but you did not stay long enough, said his mother. We must sell Milky White. All right, mother, said Jack. I'll sell Milky White, and then we'll see what we can do after that. He walked on a bit with the cow. Soon he met a funny-looking old man who said to him, Oh, good morning, Jack. Good morning to you, said Jack. How do you know my name? The man laughed and said, Oh, well, Jack, are you off to the market? Yes, I'm going to the market to sell our cow there, said Jack. Then the man said something strange. Oh, I wonder if you know how many beans make 5. 2 in each hand and 1 in your mouth, said Jack quickly. Oh, you are right, said the man. And here they are, 5 beans just for you, in exchange for your cow, of course. Are you joking with me? A cow for 5 beans, said Jack. Ah, these are magic beans, said the man. Plant them overnight and by morning they grow right up to the sky. Really? Said Jack. Yes, that is so, said the man. Well, you can have your cow back if this does not happen. Right, said Jack, and took the beans. He headed off home without Milky White. How much did you get for her? Asked Jack's mother, waiting at the door of their house. I got magic beans in exchange for our cow, mother. We will soon be rich. What? Cried Jack's mother. Have you been such a fool? Oh, what will we do now? And she cried and cried and cried some more, and sent Jack to bed without any dinner. She threw the beans out of the window. When Jack woke up the next morning, he looked out the window. Why, the beans his mother had thrown out of the window into the garden had sprung up into a big beanstalk, which went up and up and up. Till it reached the sky. So the man was not a liar after all. The beanstalk grew up quite close past Jack's window. So Jack opened the window, jumped onto the beanstalk. Jack climbed and he climbed and he climbed, till at last he reached the sky. And when he got there, he found a long, winding road going somewhere. So he walked and walked till he came to a great big house. On the doorstep there stood a great big tall woman. "Good morning," said Jack politely. "Could you be so kind as to give me some breakfast, for I am very hungry." "It's breakfast you want, is it?" said the great big tall woman. "It's breakfast you'll be if you don't run away from here. My master is a mean giant, and there's nothing he likes better than boys roasted on toast. So run away now. He'll soon be coming." Please do give me something to eat. I've had nothing to eat since yesterday morning, said Jack, or I will die of hunger. Well, the great big tall woman was nice, not mean. So she took Jack into the kitchen. And gave him some bread and cheese and a glass of milk. Jack ate fast, but before he could finish, he heard thump, thump, thump. The whole house began to tremble with the noise of someone's footsteps. Oh my, it's my master, said the great big tall woman. Come along quick and jump in here. And she pushed Jack into the oven just as the giant came into the kitchen. He was big and ugly and very hungry. Oh, what's this I smell? Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll have his bones to grind my bread. Nonsense, master, said the servant. Perhaps you smell what you ate for yesterday's dinner. Go, have a wash and tidy up. By the time you come back, your breakfast will be ready for you. So, off went the giant to wash up. Jack was just going to jump out of the oven and run away when the woman told him not to. Wait till he is asleep. He always sleeps after breakfast. Well, the giant ate his breakfast. And after that, he took out a couple of bags of gold from a huge box. Sitting down on a chair, he started to count. Oh, so many gold coins. Jack crept out from the oven and quickly grabbed a bag of gold and ran as fast as he could all the way to the beanstalk. He threw down the bag of gold. Which fell straight into his mother's garden, and then he climbed down. At last he was home. He told his mother what had happened and showed her the gold and said, "Well, mother, wasn't I right about the beans? They are really magical, you see." They lived on the bag of gold for some time, but at last they came to the end of it. And Jack decided to try his luck once more up at the top of the beanstalk. So again he climbed the beanstalk. There, sure enough, was the great big tall woman standing on the doorstep. "Good morning," said Jack. "Could you please give me something to eat?" "Go away, boy," said the big tall woman, "or else my master will eat you up for breakfast." "Oh, but aren't you the boy who came here once before? Do you know, that very day my master missed one of his bags of gold?" "Really?" said Jack. "I do not know about any bag of gold, but I am very hungry. Please give me something to eat." Well, the big tall woman was nice and kind. Once again, she gave him something to eat. Once again, they heard thump, thump, thump. They heard the giant's footstep, and Jack hid in the oven. All happened as it did before. In came the giant, as he did before, and said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." And had his breakfast of 3 broiled oxen. Then he said to the servant, "Bring me the hen that lays golden eggs." So she brought it, and the giant said, "Lay!" And it laid an egg all of gold. Then the giant fell asleep. Jack quickly stole the hen and climbed down the beanstalk. He and his mother lived happily for quite some time. Then Jack wanted to bring some more things back from the house at the top of the beanstalk. His mother told him to be careful. This time he crept past the great big tall woman and hid in the oven. He hadn't been there long when he heard thump, thump, thump. As before, in came the giant and his servant. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman," thought the giant. "I smell him, servant, I smell him." "Do you, master?" said the servant. "Then, if it's that little naughty boy that stole your gold and the hen that laid the golden eggs, I am sure he's hiding in the oven." And they both rushed to the oven. But Jack wasn't there, luckily. He had crept out of the oven and was hiding somewhere else. So the giant sat down to eat his breakfast. After breakfast was over, the giant asked the servant to bring the golden harp. So she brought it and put it on the table before him. Then he said, "Sing!" And the golden harp sang beautifully, and it went on singing till the giant fell asleep. Then Jack crept out of his hiding place. He caught hold of the golden harp and ran with it towards the door. But the harp called out quite loud, "Master! Master!" And the giant was just in time to see Jack running off with his harp. Jack ran fast, but the giant was fast too. Luckily for Jack, the giant had just woken up from his sleep, and so was still drowsy. Jack swung onto the beanstalk and slid down quickly. The giant started to climb down after Jack. Jack yelled out to his mother, "Mother, mother, bring me an axe, bring me an axe!" And his mother came rushing out with the axe in her hand. Jack jumped down and got hold of the axe and chopped the beanstalk. Chop, chop, chop! Down fell the beanstalk with a crack. Then the giant fell down with a big thump. That was the end of the giant. After that, Jack and his mother lived happily ever after. They had all the money they wanted. The Little Match Girl. It was New Year's Eve, in the cold and dark night. A poor little girl was walking through the streets. The little girl lost the slippers she was wearing. One slipper fell off somewhere. And a little boy ran away with the other. No one had bought any of the matches she carried with her in her worn-out apron. Yes. Not a penny she had earned all day. She was hungry and cold. In all the windows, lights were shining. And there was a glorious smell of roast goose out there in the street. It was New Year's Eve. Her father would be very angry with her. She was scared of him. But what could she do? She sat down at a street corner and pulled out a match. A little match might do her good and warm her fingers. She drew out one. Match! She scratched it against the wall of the house she sat, trying to keep away from the cold. The fire came to light. It was a warm, bright flame, like a little candle. When she held her hands over it, it was a wonderful little light. It really seemed to the little girl as if she sat before a stove. The fire warmed her so well. When out went the flame, the stove was gone. She sat with the burnt match in her hand. She struck another. It burned. It gave a light. And where it shone on the wall, she could see through it into the room where a table stood. And the roast goose smoked gloriously, stuffed with apples and dried plums. It seemed to her that the goose hopped off the table and onto a plate just for her to eat. Then, as before, the match went out. And she felt the cold night again. She lighted another match. Now she was sitting under a beautiful Christmas tree. Thousands of candles burned upon its green branches. But once again, just as she felt the picture getting real, the match went out. The Christmas lights went higher and higher. She saw that now they were stars in the sky. One of them fell and made a long line of fire. "Oh, now someone is dying," said the little girl. For her old grandmother had said, "When a star falls, a soul goes to heaven to meet God." She rubbed another match against the wall. it became bright again, and in the light there stood her grandmother. "Grandmother!" cried the child. "Oh, take me with you. I know you will go when the match is burned out. You will go away like the warm stove, the nice roast goose, and the Christmas tree." And she rubbed the whole bundle of matches. And the matches burned with such a glow that it became brighter than the day. Her grandmother, with a smile, took the little girl up in her arms, and both flew in the light, so high up, where there was no cold nor hunger, for they reached heaven and they were with God. But down below on the ground, against the wall of the house, sat the little girl, with red cheeks frozen to death. On the last evening of the old year, people passing by stopped. "Ah, how sad," they said. Little did they know of what warmth and love the little girl had felt in her grandmother's arms, and how happy she was now.